He turned up like 5 years later, kicking rocks. He was one of the first doctors right here on the Goldfields. Tragically, ended in this building. Look at that beautiful old mining site right there. Look at this, just ruins. Dudes, I'm standing at what remains now of the Thomas Hiscock gold find. It's called the Imperial Mine and it's not far out of Buninyong. Today's story is not about Thomas Hiscock or his finding of gold, but the story starts here. And I just want to give you guys a little bit of context as to what's going on in this district in that time period. So where I'm standing now, the Imperial Quartz Mine, this site was an eruption in 1857. Not 1851 when the gold was found, 1857. Now, prior to that, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Hiscock, he was a blacksmith, and his blacksmith shop was damn near right where I'm standing. And he was in the backyard, just kicking dirt, kicking rocks, just like this. It's pretty much all he was doing, just kicking rocks. And he happened to notice something. He came across this lump of gold. Now with that, the rest is history. This district right here erupted. It turned into a swarm of miners, including the Chinese miners, and they stormed this district. Hence, years go by and the professional mine companies roll in, the Imperial Quartz Mine is created. But I want to talk about something that's gone down even before this. This is where our history kind of starts. You know, we think that areas like Ballarat, Bendigo, the Goldfields, everything that we know starts there. Well, there's a story of some people even prior to that. And if we go back too far, we don't have much to talk about except the indigenous people that were here, the original owners of the land. But in that gap, in around 1838 to 1851, when everything really got cracking, there's some people that grace this area, and they're the people that I want to talk about, but more specifically, a doctor. Today's story is the story of Dr. Richard Power. He was one of the first doctors right here on the Goldfields, and I want to present what I found about his life and his story. Now in 1838, the first Scottish-born squatters and the first white people started some of the very first settlements here in Buninyong. Again, Buninyong's about, I would say, probably a little over an hour to the west of Melbourne. It's not far from Ballarat, which is a pretty iconic mining town. Buninyong's a pretty small district, and we're going to go into town. I'll show you a little bit of that soon. But before that, I want to paint some context. So the year's 1838, we've got the Scottish-born squatters. They're starting to reside here on the land. About 4 years goes by, so now we're looking at 1842. This district started to sort of amalgamate, and a township, more like a village, not even a township, this is prior to townships, a village started to form at the foot of what's called Mount Buninyong. Again, I'm going to show you Mount Buninyong soon, that's not far from here. But the little village started to piece together, you know, the Scottish really started to come together and form a little bit of a village type community there at the foot of what was once a volcano. Mount Buninyong was once an active volcano, way before us. So we've reached the year 1842, and in that time period, a gentleman by the name of Richard Power has come to the said village. Now he's a doctor, he's a studying doctor, and he's actually an official doctor. Now, I want to be clear here when I say doctor. He was an official doctor. He was not a fake. There was a lot of, have you ever heard the word quack? People say, I went to the quack. You know, if they say they've been to the doctor, it's like Aussie slang. The term actually came from the Goldfields back in the day. The miners would call a fake doctor a quack. On the Goldfields here, it was very, very tough to decipher the difference between somebody posing as a doctor for payment, pretty much like a thief with an assignment, and that assignment is to just rob you and try and treat you for something that they know nothing about, like a con man. They were called quacks, right? Now, obviously it was tough, real tough, for miners and people in this kind of a district. You got to remember, like, this whole district here was littered with just tents, gullies, diggings, people really going crazy. Not many women and not a lot of children. But the people that were here were going crazy looking for that stuff called gold. But before all that was even going on, we're talking 1842, they hadn't even found gold in Australia yet. It was not even known of. There was no mention of this at this point. It was just a small village starting to form some people here. And to be honest, I don't even know why they were setting up camp here in the first place. It's a nice spot, but with no draw card, I can't see their logic in even setting up here in the first place. But they did. 1842, Dr. Richard Power turns up on the set. Like I say, he's an official doctor. He's not a poser, he's not an imposter, and he's definitely not a quack. He is a legitimate doctor. Now, a licensed doctor was only a thing in 1838, so about 4 years before Dr. Power even got to this place. But that was pretty seldom that people actually had the license. And being a piece of paper, well, that can be pretty easily faked too. So just because somebody was showing off a bit of paper that said that they were an official doctor really didn't mean much to people here on the Goldfields. Nonetheless, Dr. Power was legit. He had the paperwork and he was a recognised doctor with experience under his belt. Now, medicine back in those times was pretty experimental, is probably the best word. They didn't really have much in place to save you. And if you actually read any of the processes that they took upon themselves to try to save people back in the day, especially pre-gold rush time, if you read that process that they took to try to save you for whatever your symptom may be, you'd almost think that they were trying to kill you. A product called chloroform was only introduced in about 1846. Now, chloroform is what they used to knock you out for surgery. This made things a whole lot nicer, but it was only demonstrated here in 1846. So again, Dr. Power, he is a predecessor to even a technological advancement like chloroform. Other things worth noting too are, on the Goldfields, a flag could be used to identify a certain somebody. So a blacksmith flew a certain flag, they could be identified, but more importantly, people that could save you, like a doctor, would fly a certain flag. Their tent, hearsay, may have a certain flag flying out front, just to help people decipher the difference between a quack and an actual doctor. Now again, a lot of this is well after the arrival of Dr. Richard Power here on the Goldfields. He predates all this stuff. And from what I read, his processes were solid and sound. However, I did read about things like trying to do a blood test back in the day was called wet cupping. There was like a cup that they would sit upside down, usually on the inside of your arm, and it had a series of blades. They would put pressure on it, the blades would slice the skin, and using a heated cup after that, it would somehow extract some kind of blood from you. And it all sounds pretty macabre, because it is. This very macabre wet cupping process where they're extracting blood from our arms, they believed somehow that it could be used to realign the four humours of the body, whatever that belief was. You got to remember that they believed still at that point in time that things like bad air and smells were what was making people sick. Other things worth noting are diphtheria alone, they would use carbolic acid on a teaspoon and make people drink that. Like, do you know what that stuff does to your throat? Do you know what it even does to your skin if you get it on the outside, even a hard part of skin, like on the sole of your foot? Yet to swallow carbolic acid was one of their remedies to try to help somebody suffering from diphtheria. You could only imagine the infection that would have encroached on the scalding burns inside your throat and your gullet if you were to introduce something like acid. Other things like putting slugs, like blood-sucking slugs on the neck to try to suck infection out. And all this stuff was killing the patient way quicker than the actual infection of the diphtheria. I'm not even sure that it's experimental. It's almost like a Dr. Death experiment. We're going to head into Buninyong Township, and it's a busy little spot. I want to try to paint a little bit of a picture as to what part of town Dr. Richard Power set up shop. They say that it was on the southwest part of the mountain. My inkling and my observation of the district would be that it is pretty much right where the township stands now. If you're looking at the mountain from a southerly perspective, the township is literally on the southwest corner of the mountain. So I would say that where his initial setup in 1842 is going to be pretty much where the town sits to this day. I'm thinking while I'm talking, but I think when we get there it will help paint a little bit better of a picture. That's up next. Now what we've got here on the south end of Buninyong Township is the remains of what was the courthouse and the police station. I'm trying to paint a little bit of a time period for you guys so you can understand what was going on at about the time that Dr. Power got here to the township. We're talking 1850, there was a police camp set up here. Now, police back then, I'm sure you're probably half familiar with the Eureka Stockade, the Eureka Rebellion. That is when the miners went head to head with the police over their mining license issues. And it did not go well. That's another story in its entirety. But it gives you a little bit of demographic as to what was going on between people, the general public on the forefront, and the police. They were pretty frowned upon in that time period. And to this day, they probably still are in the eyes of a lot of people. However, back then, it was a little more rogue, a little bit more unprofessional. So there would have been an amalgamation of police here, horseback we're talking early troops, and this was where they congregated in 1850. Now, Dr. Richard Power actually predates anything that was even happening on this site. So we can tell by the age on these old buildings that we're really going back even prior to any of this. I want to show you what's out the back. The old police station's out here, and I think it's a great piece. Now on the way around the back of this building, I just want to show you the sandstone that it's built out of, because I think it's excellent. Around this back wall here, now keeping in mind this has been restored, man, like this is not truly original. The bricks would be original sandstone, however, I believe that the mortar has had quite a bit of repair over the years. But look at that. Isn't that excellent? I think this was the courthouse portion of things, which happened way after. So 1850, campfires, pretty ordinary sort of, you know, probably a few stakes in the ground to tie the horses up to. Very, very primitive setup. Around 1855-ish, things would have started to get a little bit more formalised. I believe about 1857 saw the building actually become erected, so the actual police building got built. That's over here. I'll take you over and show you. All right, police station. Here we have it. That's a nice piece. The police station here was built in 1859. It is 17 years after Richard Power descending here on the Buninyong Township. So as old as this all is, this is 17 years newer than Dr. Richard Power. It really helps paint the picture as to just how far back we've gone. I'm pretty confident this building would have had quite some facelifts over the years. It would be absolute ruins without a helping hand from old matey Muscle and a lot of good Samaritans, I would have thought. Again, all we're doing here is we're just trying to paint that picture as to what was happening here in the township in that time period. Like I say, I'm on the southern point of town. Town is probably a 10-minute walk from here. It seems a little sporadic, like they intended on things happening here and then they've sort of moved north a little bit. I'm not sure why that is. northeast out that way on the other side of these big pine trees here. If the pine trees weren't there, we would be able to see Mount Buninyong quite clearly. Obviously, there's some foliage in the way now. And town is straight through here. We also have their beautiful historic botanical gardens, but that's another topic entirely. They are of the same vintage and time period of the police camp here. The gardens are as old as the police camp. They went hand in hand. They were developed at a very similar time set. Let's go now and just take a quick look in town and try to piece together where I think Dr. Richard Power's practice would have been first amalgamated and set up. That's up next. Just a little bit more of time management here. 1842, Dr. Richard Power arrives here in Buninyong. Now, that's 5 years before the legendary, the Reverend, Mr. Thomas Hastie. He turned up like 5 years later. 1847 saw the arrival of religification to, I would say the Goldfields, but it's not even the Goldfields yet. It's to Buninyong, to the village that it's referred to as. So religion had not even really set its grounds here with these Scottish people setting up the village here. It's tough to fathom really when we go back prior to the Goldfields that we know and love. We've really rewound the clock significantly too. We have predated religification and religious studies in the district. All right guys, welcome to the absolute epicenter of beautiful Buninyong Township. There's a couple of things here that I want to show you guys. Number one, this is the courthouse and town hall. Although 1886 is the year that this was built, so we're looking for an 1842 genre. This stuff is built way later than that. Remember, Dr. Richard Power actually died in 1852, so this stuff was built after he was even gone. What I did notice is up the top we have Marty McFly and Doc's clock. Don't worry about it, they'll be here in a jiffy. Just a bit of time travel going on, you know what I mean? Up there, look. I'm going to turn the camera around in a second and show you a little bit of what I see here in town. It's tough to piece together the past now that we're so advanced. Check this out. So what we got over here is the shop fronts that everyone still uses to this day. Got an old school hotel over here, the Crown Hotel over there on the corner, I think it's called. Very modern supermarket across the street here. Some old shop fronts here. I believe back in the day one of these was a butcher. I can't be sure on the history of a lot of those. But like I say, it's very tough to try to piece together where a doctor's surgery would have been in 1842. Now, my suspicion on the whole thing is there would have been nothing here except a paddock. I don't even reckon the paddocks would have had fences around them, to be straight with you. I think this whole area would have been nothing. Absolutely nothing. I believe that the original township would have resided up on the mountain, which is this way. If that tree wasn't in the line of view, you'd be able to see Mount Buninyong. And I think that's where the original township really started. For some reason, it's come downstream a little bit to this part of the district. I can't piece that part of it together. The original police camp is about a 3-minute, 4-minute walk behind these buildings here in town. So it's all a bit of a wash as to how it all came about. And as to where Dr. Richard Power's surgery was, we're never going to know. 1860. Now that's 18 years after Dr. Richard Power arrived here, this beautiful building was erected. It is relevant, and the reason that it's relevant is it is actually a historic doctor's. The first doctor in here was Dr. Richard Sparling, early 1860, Dr. Scott in 1879, Dr. Hardy in the 1880s. So again, it really paints a picture as to how far back we've gone. This place is like an old school house of pain. I could only imagine how many people had passed away in here trying to seek some sort of help, you know? The cemetery here is probably full of people with stories that began here and tragically ended in this building. It looks beautiful, but it's probably not if we go down that track. Now they call this beautiful spot Netherby, and it just looks so picturesque today. Look at it. What a masterpiece. However, I'm pretty confident if we could crawl into the past and look at its history, I don't reckon it would be so pretty. I think it would be truly horrific. I know yous have all been wondering, did I find what happened to Dr. Richard Power in the finish? Well, I did, and I know where he resides. The beautiful Buninyong Cemetery, and we're going to go for a little walk and see if we can find his grave. There's not much to guess here because I know where it is. Let's do this. And that's going to be it right there. It certainly is. Dr. Power, who died 11th of December 1852, aged 48 years. Now the headstone here says he was 48 years. We can't be certain on that. Some things that I've read say he was 47, this says he was 48. I do intend on trying to obtain his death certificate. I'm not sure how I'm going to go doing that given the time period. At this time of filming, I've got to be upfront and honest, and I've not had any luck getting that as yet. But don't panic just yet, it might happen.
See how your buddy Sharpie looks a little sad in this scene? That's because there's no death certificate available. You see, Dr. Richard Power was the go-to boy for getting death certificates signed in the district in that time period. He could not sign his own, and there was no one to represent him in his premature death. I dug deep on this one, and there was no death certificate lodged.
Now, Mr. Richard Power's in here with his wife Mary. She is noted on here, and I have seen a couple of very minor discrepancies. I'm going to show you what those are. Now, the headstone here states that Mary passed away 4th of August 1872, aged 68 years. Find a Grave, however, says that it was 1876, so that's 4 years the difference. If she did die in 1872, that's 20 years after her husband. If she did die in 1876 and Find a Grave is correct, that's 24 years later. Either way, it probably doesn't really matter a whole lot, but it is a discrepancy and we find this a lot.
After the death of her husband, Dr. Richard Power, Mary spent the remaining years in her life living here in Buninyong. She remained a devoted widow and eventually came back to be with Dr. Richard Power in death in the grave. That is called lifelong devotion.
It seems too that, and I didn't realise, there is a 38-year-old son in here. Henry Arthur died 31st of October 1869. So Henry did outlive his father substantially.
Now I just wanted to take a minute to fill in a couple of the blanks here. By the late 1840s, Dr. Power was so overwhelmed for his services and demands for his services that he had to hire a colleague. And what he did was he hired a gentleman by the name of William Rankin. He was a young doctor from Edinburgh, and he actually brought Rankin out here to help him run the practice. Now this comes with a little bit of a catch. He wasn't expecting this to happen. Rankin actually fell in love with Dr. Power's daughter. At the time, Henrietta, Power's daughter, was only 17. She married Dr. Rankin the year after Richard Power passed away. So Henrietta's dad, as in Dr. Power, never actually got to see her wed. However, she did go on to marry Dr. Rankin in 1853 on the 15th of March in Buninyong. They went on to have 6 sons and 5 daughters, so a family of 11 children in the end. She lived a full life. She passed away on the 13th of December in the year 1904 in St Kilda, Victoria, Australia. Interesting also too is that Dr. Rankin and Dr. Richard Power's daughter Henrietta continued to run the practice in the absence of Dr. Richard Power due to his untimely death.
Now, Dr. Richard Power is noted as being the first doctor in Victoria. I think that's a big call. We can't be sure on that, but that's what he's noted as in the history books. 1842 makes him the first renowned, known and licensed doctor operating in Victoria. They're big boots to fill. If this is our guy, well, kudos to him for that. Another thing that I came across too, it also states that he was not always of sound mind and he was a real worrywart. And they say that that is what contributed to his death. His stressing and worrying about running his medical practice. He was obviously passionate about it, but it's got to him, and it's got to him deeply because Dying at 48 is pretty young, especially when you're a doctor. A doctor, even then, had a rough idea how to look after himself. Also too, this grave being 1852, that makes it a whole new record for us here on the channel. I don't recall presenting a grave prior to this. Not to say that we don't, but 1852 is definitely way back there. We're generally talking about graves here on the channel at least that are, 20, 30 years newer than this, from the 1880s, 1890s. This being 1852, man, that's going way back there. Now the headstone itself, I believe, is time period correct. I believe that the extra addition down here, Henry Arthur, the son, in 1869 would have been chiseled in by a mason right here on site. I think that slate style headstone is very true to the period, and I believe it was probably put here when Dr. Power first passed away. But what I'm seeing here is definitely a new record for the channel here. I believe when it comes to age, 1852 is way back there. It's literally 1 year after Mr. Thomas Hiscock found gold, literally straight across the road from this very cemetery. Straight across the road is where our video today started, at the Imperial Quartz Mine. It's really quite an embarkment for this gentleman to undertake, to come here in 1842 with his wife Mary, and I've just learned now too, his 4 children. So he brought 4 little kids out here from Ireland, Dublin Island he originated, and he's came out here to provide medicine to our people. In the very early days of our colony, it's a bit of kudos to him really, isn't it? Like, it's quite a feat to undertake, especially in those times. We're talking sailing ships, rough seas, coming out to an unfound colony that's not refined yet, with 4 little kids and a wife too. You're very vulnerable to the unbeknowns. Well, you know what they say about tombstones, it's generally the end. And that is the end of today's video. I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me. We're gonna catch up next weekend for a whole new adventure on something different. But for now, it's your boy Sharpie signing off. Bye everyone.